Alright, so the plant that I'll be doing is Agave Americana, and I chose this because it's a plant found on our side of the world, and our continent, and I think it's a unique plant, and I've always wanted to get more into it and research and see what this plant is all about. So, Agave Americana is the most common species of agave that we have. There are numerous species within the family. The family is Asparagaceae, which actually includes the asparagus plants, and it's been recently reformed into that family in about 2009. So we're just learning more and more about it. Agave is also known colloquially as the century plant, even though that's not correct, because the flowering time it's a semiparous plant, and it takes from 10 to 30 years to start the inflorescence. So colloquially, people start to call it the century plant because it took so long that they assumed it would take 100 years. And it is a monocot, and it is an angiosperm, and it's, I guess how you would say, its form is a succulent, meaning that it's nice and juicy and holds water and sorts of nutrients inside of its leaves, which I'll demonstrate. And there's a big reason for that, and it has to do with its semiparity. So the gender system is it is a hermaphrodite, so it has both male and female gametes. And as far as I can tell, I have found no evidence of selfing, which is interesting. And the reason why I haven't, and I think there's a good reason, is because agave has two forms of clonal reproduction, both vegetative. The first form is called bulbils, and the second form is called offsets. You would think it's offshoots, but for some reason it's called offsets. So the bulbils are basically clones of the mother plant, and they grow below the sepal. And they can grow throughout the lifetime of the plant, even before the inflorescence. And they just kind of grow, fall off, they contain all the genetic information, and they can throw down their roots and shoots and stuff like that and become a new plant. We'll take a closer look at when this happens. And the offsets are basically rhizomatous offsets through the roots that come from underground and go not too far, about maybe 20 feet, if not less. So agave usually grows in patches. And this is one of the reasons, because the offsets kind of go underground, and they come up, and you have a new agave plant, but it is a clone. If the offset is given time to grow, you can actually chop off the connection between the mother and the clone, and it'll continue to grow. If it's too young and you chop that connection, researchers have found that it will die without the nutrient load. So I kind of want to get into what makes this such a unique plant, because it demonstrates syndromes that are mostly found in desert-dwelling plants. So Agave Americana, when it starts to grow throughout its lifetime, the leaves, I call them leaves, they're very thin. They're sort of sharp with spikes on the ends, and they're quite thin, even though it is a succulent. And throughout its lifetime, Nobel found that it can load up to 18 kilograms of water and resources, and the leaves become sort of chubbier and thicker. There's like a difference between their thickness, and they're constantly loading things in. And then, when the inflorescence begins, it prepares for semiparity, and we learned about this in class. So the agave plant sort of looks like this, with these long spiky leaves coming out of a center, which they call a pineapple or piña in Mexican. But when it's ready, it grows a long stem out, and it pushes all the water and nutrients from all of its leaves downward and into the center, causing it to die afterwards. But when it does, it can grow up to 10 centimeters a day. So it pushes it up, and when finished, the flowers sort of come off to the sides like trumpets. They have these little rods coming out on both sides. And it's very, very, very tall, about 6 meters up. And so we ask ourselves the question, well, why is it so tall? And why do the flowers come up like that? And why are they trumpet shaped? The flower is shaped like this, with nectar being found inside of here. So researchers found that this is a bat-pollinated plant. And bats will use their tongue, proboscis, to go down into here and lap the nectar. And as they do, the plant, pardon my drawing, but the bat's face sort of, here's the tongue. No, it's not very good. The bat's face becomes covered in pollen, which is filled with protein. Sometimes they eat it. and they go around to another flower, and they continue to pollinate, eating nectar and pollinating. And the scent, the way that they attract the plants, is very specific as well. It's described as sharp sweet, which is a specific scent to bats. It's also found in other types of cacti-related plants, although this is not a cacti. So we know that the agave is designed to be pollinated by bats, but if it doesn't have those bat pollinators, it can again go off to its bulbils and its offsets. So speaking of which, in Spain and in the Mediterranean region, when Europeans introduced agave, it has become invasive because it's so hardy. And one of the reasons why it's invasive is because when introduced to sandy soil rather than clay where it's generally found, it switches to bulbal reproduction vegetatively, and it reproduces so quickly that patches can just fly out faster than the time of inflorescence. So we know that the environment and the soil quality somehow, they don't know how, but somehow changes how the plant decides to reproduce. That may be a reason that it does not self. It honestly doesn't need to self because it can just quickly vegetatively reproduce. Tequila, which is produced by a cousin, Agave tequilana, all of the tequila that we drink in the United States and that they grow in the Jalisco region of Mexico, they are all clones, and they're actually all bulbils. They never reproduce their tequilas, and they think that they're going to run into a problem sooner or later because of inbreeding, and generally, if they have a disease, since everyone's a clone, they're going to get sick. So they grow millions of these agaves, and they're all bulbil clones, and that should tell you something because tequila grows in about 7 years. It's faster than Americana, but that's a related plant. Lastly, I want to talk about the seeds when it is actually fertilized, the fruit that comes. It is dehiscent, so it's dry, and it's an eggplant-shaped fruit. It's quite small, the size of a dime, and when it's dry, it opens sort of like in a pod form, like that, if you can see, and 8 to 10 black little seeds just kind of fall out, and they fall out from here and off to the sides of the plant. So when this dies, there's obviously more space for the plant to begin to reproduce again. All in all, that's Agave Americana, hardy, North American, and that's about it.